Hi everyone, I'm Alexander Zeitlin, and this is the Lockdown Lecture Series for beginner violin, adapted from the Alias Music Introductions course for the classroom setting. This is our very last lecture in this series, and so at the end of this, you'll be able to play the entire Bach G major minuet and a couple extra things that I'm going to add in just for this lecture. So as usual, we start off by sort of reviewing the work that we did last time. We worked on rhythm and dealing with bow distribution with long and short bows, and kind of prepared for the Bach minuet that way. We started the first section, and the assignment was to complete at least the A sections of the Bach minuet, although I gave you guys markings for the entire thing. And then usually at this point, we start by playing everything through. But I'm going to save the run-throughs for the end because I'm going to talk about a couple of things that will just help you guys with the Bach minuet before we jump into that. So normally I have all the fingerings written out and you guys check them to make sure that they're correct. But we've been doing so much of this, I'm going to trust all of you to figure out the right fingerings. This is a common piece. You can look up many recordings of it, and also you'll be able to play along with me later. So if it sounds wrong, you missed a fingering, go back and double check with your scale. However, today we're going to talk about how to transition from reading fingerings to not reading fingerings anymore. Essentially, the problem is that when you are, reading in all those strings and fingers, your eyes are here looking at all of these notes or these letters and numbers instead of on the notes themselves. Now later on, that means that if you keep on doing that, you're going to be looking at letters and numbers instead of looking at things like bowings, articulations, things like dynamics that appear along with the notes. So we don't really want to get used to that for too long. It's a necessary thing for when you start a string instrument, but it's something that you want to transition out of. So I'll give you my helpful hint of how to transition out of working with strings and fingers. So I'm going to do this on the B section so we can kind of start on the second half here. Now, what I like to do is to tell people, okay, imagine where the open strings are. So if we look back at our scale, we see that, E0 is right here on the top space. A0 is on the second space from the bottom. D0 is just underneath the staff, and G0 is below 2 ledger lines below the staff. So that's where all our open strings are. So sometimes what you might want to do is just like write that in as a helpful hint. So you go down here and there's our B1 section. So I could even just write it in here, like just write in a little note here, a note here, a note here, and then draw your 2 ledger lines and a note here. This just reminds you that here's where my E0, A0, D0, and G0 are. Now, you know that basically, if you were to play your scale, your fingerings go 0, 1, 2, 3, and then it goes on to the next string, 0, 1, 2, 3, and then so on. So for example, this note right here, the very first note in B1, if I count up to it, I go E0, because that's my E open string right here. So E0, E1, E2, the line is E3, and that makes this E4, right? So that's just how I figure out where I am. The next note goes down 2 notes, right? So it goes from E4 to E3 and then down to E2. It goes up to E3, E4. I think by now you guys are pretty good, especially at reading notes at what we call a stepwise motion. So that's when the notes just go up or down 1 note. So most of the time you're not going to need to think about where all the open strings are and how to count up to them, except if it jumps. Like here's a big jump right here. Maybe if I know what this note is, I might not want to count 1 note at a time down to here, but instead I might just want to go, okay, so A0 is right under that, A0, A1, A2, A3. Or you can just think, here's E0, it's 1 below E0, that's A3. Right, so this note would be A3. So to practice that, you'll have plenty of opportunity to practice that as you learn new music. Don't be afraid to, on occasion, write in help. There's a big jump, and let's say you tend to make a mistake right here. There's like a normal place you make a mistake. Then just write in like A3 as a helpful hint. But start to work on not reading your strings and fingers. It takes a little bit of practice to do it. A good way to do it, if you're learning a section, let's say you're working on B1, this is for the first time, and now you're trying to do it without reading strings and fingerings, is the very first, like if you were, just learning this normally, you would do 3 times whole bows, just the notes, and then you would work on bowings and things like that, rhythm. Very first time when you're doing just long bows on every note, just say it out loud, just as a process of like focusing and counting. You look at the first note, you go E4, and then you play it, and then E2, E3, and so on. Now, just to clarify, you will all still need your classmates or a teacher or someone more advanced than you to write in arrows. We didn't cover that in this lecture series. That is a much longer process. I'm going to encourage everyone to get a private teacher so that they can learn how to do all that stuff. Only so much we can do in one lecture series. But if you guys have done all this, you guys have gone from first time touching your instrument to now playing your first ever classical piece. And this is a long classical piece. It's an entire page long. So all that said, now I will play through the entire piece, and then I also have one more bonus thing to share with you guys right after that. So I'm going to play through the Bach Minuet in G, and you guys can play along and just check your work. Here we go. From the beginning, the entire thing. right, so if you made it, congratulations. That is the entire G major minuet. If not, keep practicing. You will make it through eventually. Remember, practice slowly but correctly. Never play faster than you can play well, and the speed will come on its own. All right, so one last thing, a little bonus. You will notice that when you play other music in your ensemble classes, you will have to deal with something that looks like, I'm going to demonstrate this on the scale. I'll use a different color here. I'll use purple. Something that looks like this. It's like a half curve between notes, and I might have several of them. This is what's known as a legato mark, or some violinists call it a slur. And essentially, there are two basic articulations. When a note doesn't have any marking on it, it's what's, you play it with what's known as something called détaché articulation, or detached notes. If there is a dot under the note or over the note head, that is known as a staccato mark. And if it's connected like this, that is known as a legato mark. So those are our two most basic articulations. Now, if I had these first four notes, G0, G1, G2, G3, and I played them separately, they would sound like this. And if I put this legato mark in, now it sounds like this. So without changing my bow, I changed my fingers. And you can see it makes the sound much more connected. And that's legato means connected notes. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to start by slurring or legato, connecting 4 notes per bow. Okay, it's kind of easy to follow because all the notes are already grouped in 4s by their 8th notes. But I will go over it, I will demonstrate it, and kind of give you some helpful hints for practicing it, and just give you one thing you have to watch out for when you're doing it. So my hint is, for when you're starting this, is to think of all 4 notes before you start. You know, G0, G1, G2, G3, and then you play without stopping the bow. Then pause. Then think about your next 4 notes. D0, D1, D2, D3. And then A0, A1, A2, A3. E0, E1, E2, E1. Now watch out, you're going to play E0, switch to A3, A2, A1 in the middle of the bow. It sounds like this. And then it continues the same pattern, and so on. Now, watch out, when you change strings, you're going to want to change bow, but don't. Okay, on the way down, you get to learn how to change strings without changing bow. I will now demonstrate the whole thing, and here's what it sounds like. When you get good at that grouping, you can start practicing 8 on a bow. So think of it as 2 groups of 4 in one bow. You know, the slur marking would look like this. Even 16 on a bow. It's very good practice for your bow distribution. All right, everyone, we learned how to approach reading notes without strings and fingers. We would, and also took a look at slurs. Congratulations, huge progress. Keep practicing, keep learning. There's so much to learn. As much as you learn as a beginner, I would say if you can do this, you are most of the way through being a beginner. You only have a little bit left. You need to learn how to take slightly longer pieces, maybe slightly more complex rhythms. And then you are ready for kind of the intermediate stage and getting out of first position and getting into more technique and learning vibrato and all things like that. So keep practicing, keep up your good work, and see you in another lecture series.